My name is Margaret Chen, and this is the story of how my own son tried to humiliate me in my golden years, forcing me to sleep on cold hardwood floors during visits to see my grandchildren. What he didn't know was that I held the keys to his entire financial future, and when he finally discovered the truth, the look of absolute terror on his face made every sleepless night worth it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I wasn't just a retired grandmother he could push around. I was the silent owner of Cascade Lending Solutions, the very mortgage company that held the note on his $500,000 suburban dream home. And when he found out, everything changed. The trouble started 3 years ago when my son Kevin married Brittany, a woman who seemed to view me as nothing more than an inconvenient relic from his past. I had raised Kevin as a single mother after his father walked out when Kevin was just 8 years old. I worked double shifts at the textile factory, saved every penny I could, and made sure he had everything he needed to succeed. When he graduated, with an engineering degree and landed a position at a tech company in Portland, I was the proudest mother alive. But success changed Kevin. Or maybe Brittany changed Kevin. It's hard to say which came first, but the transformation was undeniable. The warm, considerate son who used to call me every Sunday gradually became a stranger who seemed embarrassed by his humble beginnings and the woman who had sacrificed everything to give him a better life. When Kevin announced his engagement to Brittany, I was genuinely happy for him. She came from what she called good breeding, with parents who owned a chain of boutique hotels and a trust fund that could probably support a small country. At their wedding, held at an exclusive country club that cost more than I had made in 5 years at the factory, I felt completely out of place among the crystal champagne flutes and designer gowns. But I smiled through it all because I loved my son and wanted him to be happy. The first sign of trouble came when Kevin and Brittany purchased their house in the affluent Westbrook Hills neighborhood. It was a stunning colonial with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a price tag that made my head spin. When Kevin casually mentioned the mortgage amount during a phone call, I nearly dropped the receiver. How could a young couple, even with good jobs, afford such an astronomical payment? That's when Brittany's influence became clear. She had convinced Kevin that they needed to establish themselves properly in Portland society. The house wasn't just a home, it was a statement piece, a way to announce their arrival among the city's young elite. Never mind that the mortgage payment consumed nearly 60% of their combined income, or that they had stretched themselves so thin financially that they could barely afford furniture for the cavernous rooms. I should have seen the warning signs then. During my first visit to their new home 6 months after the wedding, Brittany made it abundantly clear that I was an unwelcome intrusion in their carefully curated lifestyle. When I complimented the beautiful hardwood floors in the living room, she launched into a monologue about how they were imported Italian oak, installed by craftsmen who had worked on celebrities' homes. When I mentioned that the kitchen was bigger than my entire apartment, she sniffed and said it was actually quite modest compared to her childhood home. But it was the sleeping arrangements that truly opened my eyes to how things had changed. I had assumed, naturally, that I would stay in one of the guest bedrooms during my weekend visit. After all, they had 4 bedrooms for just the 2 of them. Instead, Brittany informed me that both spare rooms were being used as her office and Kevin's gaming room respectively, and that I would be perfectly comfortable on the living room couch. The couch, while expensive-looking, was one of those modern minimalist pieces that prioritized style over comfort. It was too short for my 5'6" frame, and too firm to provide any real support for my aging joints. I spent that first night, tossing and turning, my back aching from the unforgiving cushions and my feet hanging awkwardly over the armrest. When I mentioned my discomfort the next morning, Brittany merely shrugged and suggested I might want to consider staying at a hotel next time if their accommodations weren't suitable. Kevin said nothing. My son, who had once been so protective of me that he would walk me to my car after dark, simply sat there drinking his organic fair trade coffee and scrolling through his phone while his wife insulted his mother. That silence hurt more than any of Brittany's passive-aggressive comments ever could. The visits continued every few months, and each one followed the same humiliating pattern. I would arrive with gifts for Kevin and whatever small token I thought might soften Brittany's heart, only to be treated like an unwelcome guest in their pristine showcase home. The couch became my regular sleeping arrangement, despite my increasingly vocal complaints about the discomfort and my doctor's warnings about my chronic back problems. But things took a truly devastating turn when their daughter Emma was born 2 years ago. I had been looking forward to becoming a grandmother with an excitement I hadn't felt since Kevin was small. I imagined teaching Emma to bake cookies, reading her bedtime stories, and spoiling her the way grandmothers are supposed to do. Instead, I found myself even more marginalized than before. Brittany had very specific ideas about child-rearing, most of them gleaned from expensive parenting books and exclusive mommy groups. She didn't want Emma exposed to what she called outdated methods of childcare, which apparently included everything from letting a baby cry for more than 30 seconds to feeding her anything that wasn't organic and locally sourced. When I suggested that a little bit of spoiling never hurt anyone, Brittany launched into a lecture about how over-permissive grandparents could undermine parents' authority and create behavioral problems. The sleeping situation became even more ridiculous after Emma's arrival. Brittany converted what had been Kevin's gaming room into a nursery, but instead of offering me the remaining spare room, she insisted it needed to stay available as a quiet space for when Emma got older. So there I was, a 72-year-old woman with arthritis and chronic sciatica, still relegated to sleeping on a couch that seemed to get more uncomfortable with each visit. The final straw came during last Christmas. I had driven the 4 hours from my small town to Portland through a terrible snowstorm because I didn't want to miss Emma's first Christmas. When I arrived, exhausted and chilled to the bone, I found that Brittany had invited her parents to stay for the holiday week. They, of course, were given the guest room with the comfortable queen bed and private bathroom. That night, as I lay on the living room couch listening to the wind howl outside and feeling every spring in the cheap cushions dig into my spine, something inside me finally snapped. Not with anger exactly, but with a cold, clear realization that I had been allowing myself to be treated with profound disrespect by my own son and his wife. I was not some burden to be grudgingly tolerated. I was Kevin's mother, the woman who had worked her fingers to the bone to give him every opportunity in life. What Kevin and Brittany didn't know, what nobody knew except my attorney and accountant, was that I wasn't the simple factory retiree they assumed me to be. 25 years ago, I had made a decision that would change my life forever, though I had never imagined it would become relevant to my relationship with my son. When Kevin was in high school and I was working those double shifts at the textile factory, I witnessed something that would alter the trajectory of my entire life. The factory was struggling financially, and rumors of layoffs were constant. I watched as my fellow workers, many of them women like me who were supporting families on their own, lived in constant fear of losing their jobs and their homes. I saw how the banks treated them when they fell behind on mortgage payments, how quickly they could go from homeowners to homeless with just a few missed payments. That's when I met Harold Yamamoto, a Japanese-American businessman who owned several small companies around the region. Harold's parents had lost everything during World War II when they were forced into internment camps, and he had built his fortune back up through careful investing and treating people fairly. He had been looking for a silent partner to help him expand into the mortgage lending business, someone who understood the struggles of working-class families and could help ensure that his company operated with integrity. I had been saving money for Kevin's college education, living on rice and beans for months at a time to put away every possible dollar. It wasn't much by investment standards, but Harold saw something in me that others had missed. He offered me a partnership in what would become Cascade Lending Solutions, with the understanding that I would remain a silent partner while he handled the day-to-day operations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It was a terrifying decision. I was risking Kevin's college fund on a business venture I barely understood. But Harold spent hours explaining the mortgage industry to me, teaching me about interest rates and loan structures and the importance of responsible lending. He showed me how we could build a company that helped families achieve homeownership without the predatory practices that were becoming common in the industry. The risk paid off beyond my wildest dreams. Cascade Lending Solutions grew from a small regional lender to one of the most respected mortgage companies in the Pacific Northwest. We specialized in helping first-time homebuyers and working families, offering competitive rates and flexible terms that the big banks wouldn't consider. Our reputation for fair dealing attracted customers from across the region, and our portfolio grew steadily year after year. Harold and I agreed that my role would remain completely confidential. On paper, I was listed only as a minority investor, with no public connection to the company's operations. This arrangement suited me perfectly. I didn't want the attention or responsibility that came with being known as a successful businesswoman. I just wanted security for Kevin and myself, and the satisfaction of knowing that we were helping families achieve their dreams of homeownership. The profits from Cascade Lending Solutions allowed me to pay for Kevin's education without him ever knowing where the money came from. When he asked how I could afford such expensive tuition on a factory worker's salary, I told him I had been saving since he was born and had made some lucky investments. It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. By the time I retired from the factory at 65, my share of Cascade Lending Solutions was worth more than I had ever imagined possible. Harold and I had built something remarkable together, a company that had helped thousands of families while generating substantial returns for our investors. I could have revealed my success then, could have moved to a bigger house or taken exotic vacations, but I preferred my quiet life in the small town where I had raised Kevin. The irony wasn't lost on me that my son, who seemed so ashamed of his humble background, was living in a house financed by the very company his mother had helped build. When Kevin mentioned the name of his mortgage lender during one of our phone conversations, I nearly choked on my coffee. Cascade Lending Solutions held the note on his Westbrook Hills Colonial, the symbol of his newfound status and financial overreach. I could have said something then. I could have told him that his mother wasn't just some factory worker he needed to hide from his sophisticated friends. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was curiosity about how far he would go in his disrespect before his conscience kicked in. As I lay on that uncomfortable couch on Christmas night, listening to Brittany's parents laughing comfortably in the guest room that should have been mine, I made a decision. I was done being treated like a second-class family member. I was done pretending that their behavior was acceptable just to maintain peace. Kevin needed to learn some hard truths about respect, family, and the consequences of taking the people who love you for granted. The next morning, I packed my things quietly and left early, before anyone else was awake. I drove home through the melting snow with a new sense of purpose. It was time for Kevin to discover exactly who his mother really was, and what she was capable of when pushed too far. I had been patient for 3 years, hoping that Kevin would remember the values I had taught him and start treating me with basic human dignity. But patience, I realized, was just enabling his behavior. Sometimes the people we love most need to face the consequences of their actions before they can change. What happened next would shake the foundation of Kevin's carefully constructed world and force him to confront some uncomfortable truths about family, respect, and the woman who had given him everything. The lesson was going to be painful, but it was long overdue. The drive home that snowy December morning gave me 4 hours to think about exactly how I wanted to handle this situation. By the time I reached my modest 2-bedroom house on Maple, Street, I had formulated a plan that would teach Kevin some valuable lessons about respect, family loyalty, and the dangers of making assumptions about the people closest to you. The first thing I did was call Harold Yamamoto. Even though he was officially retired and had handed over daily operations to his son David, Harold still maintained an office at Cascade Lending Solutions and kept close tabs on the company's major accounts. When I explained what I wanted to do, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Margaret," Harold said finally, his voice carrying both concern and amusement. "Are you certain this is the path you want to take? Family relationships can be delicate things." I told Harold about the Christmas visit, about sleeping on the couch while Brittany's parents enjoyed the guest room, about the years of subtle humiliation and outright disrespect. I explained how Kevin had become someone I barely recognized, more concerned with impressing his wife's social circle than maintaining a relationship with the mother who had raised him. "He needs to understand that actions have consequences," I said firmly, "and maybe this will help him remember where he came from and who helped him get where he is." Harold was quiet for another moment. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "I want you to schedule a routine account review with Kevin and Brittany. Nothing threatening, just a standard meeting to discuss their mortgage terms and payment history. Let them know that Cascade Lending Solutions is conducting quarterly reviews of all high-value accounts to ensure customer satisfaction and explore potential refinancing opportunities. And then? And then we see how they react when they're reminded that their financial security isn't as solid as they think it is." Harold chuckled softly. "You know, Margaret, I've seen you negotiate some tough deals over the years, but I think this might be your most creative strategy yet." The letter arrived at Kevin and Brittany's house 3 days later. It was printed on official Cascade Lending Solutions letterhead and signed by David Yamamoto, Harold's son and the current president of the company. The language was perfectly professional and non-threatening, simply requesting that Kevin and Brittany schedule an appointment to review their mortgage account and discuss potential opportunities for improved service. Kevin called me that evening, and I could hear the stress in his voice immediately. "Mom, did you know that mortgage companies do these random review meetings? Brittany's freaking out because she thinks they might be looking to call in our loan or something." I kept my voice carefully neutral. "I'm sure it's just routine, sweetheart. Banks and lending companies do that sort of thing all the time to keep track of their accounts. But why now? We've never been late on a payment, and our credit scores are excellent." "Maybe they want to offer you better terms," I suggested innocently. "Mortgage rates have been fluctuating lately. They might be trying to help you save money." Kevin didn't sound convinced, but he thanked me for the reassurance and hung up. I could only imagine the conversation he was having with Brittany, who had probably never faced any real financial uncertainty in her privileged life. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 o'clock. I made sure to clear my afternoon schedule, though Kevin and Brittany had no idea I would be anywhere near the Cascade Lending Solutions building. I had a key to Harold's private office, which had a window overlooking the main conference room where David would be meeting with my son and daughter-in-law. I arrived at the office an hour early and positioned myself in Harold's chair with a clear view of the conference room below. David had been briefed on the situation and understood that this was as much about family dynamics as it was about business. He was one of the few people who knew about my ownership stake in the company, and he had agreed to help me teach Kevin some overdue lessons about humility and respect. Kevin and Brittany arrived precisely on time, both dressed in their most conservative business attire. Kevin wore a navy suit that I recognized as one of his most expensive, while Brittany had chosen a cream-colored dress with matching blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. Even from my perch 1 floor above, I could see the tension in their posture as they approached the building. David greeted them in the lobby and escorted them to the conference room. Through the large windows, I watched as he offered them coffee and made small talk while setting up his presentation materials. Kevin kept checking his phone nervously, while Brittany sat ramrod straight in her chair, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her lap. Thank you both for coming in today, David began, his voice carrying clearly through the building's intercom system that Harold had discreetly activated for my benefit. As I mentioned in my letter, we're conducting quarterly reviews of our premium accounts to ensure that our customers are receiving the best possible service and to identify any opportunities for improved loan terms. Is there a problem with our account? Brittany interrupted, her voice sharp with anxiety. Because I want to be very clear that we have never missed a payment, and our income has actually increased since we took out the loan. David smiled, reassuringly. There's absolutely no problem with your account, Mrs. Thompson. In fact, your payment history is exemplary. This meeting is purely proactive on our part. Kevin leaned forward slightly. So this is just a routine thing? You do this with all your customers? We do these reviews with our most valued clients, David replied smoothly. Your loan represents a significant investment for Cascade Lending Solutions, and we want to make sure you're completely satisfied with our service. I watched as Kevin and Brittany exchanged glances, some of the tension leaving their shoulders. They had expected the worst, and were relieved to discover this was apparently just a customer service initiative. David spent the next 20 minutes reviewing their account history, praising their consistent payments, and discussing potential refinancing options that could lower their monthly obligations. Kevin and Brittany gradually relaxed, with Brittany even making a few jokes about her initial anxiety. I have to admit, Kevin said with a sheepish grin, when we got your letter, we were terrified that something was wrong. The mortgage market has been so unpredictable lately, and we've heard horror stories about people getting their loans called in for no reason. I completely understand your concern, David replied. The mortgage industry does have a reputation for unexpected surprises. But I want to assure you that Cascade Lending Solutions operates very differently from some of the larger, more impersonal companies in our field. What makes you different? Brittany asked, seeming genuinely curious for the first time since. The meeting began. David leaned back in his chair, adopting a more conversational tone. Well, for one thing, we're still a family-owned business. Our founding principles emphasize long-term relationships over short-term profits. We believe in treating our customers the way we would want our own family members to be treated. That's refreshing, Kevin said. Most of the financial companies we've dealt with seem to view customers as just numbers on a spreadsheet. Exactly, David agreed. Our founder always believed that business should be personal. In fact, one of our major investors has been with the company since the very beginning, and she's someone who truly understands the importance of family and treating people with respect. I smiled to myself as I watched Kevin nod along, completely oblivious to the significance of David's words. Speaking of family, David continued, I understand you have a young daughter. How old is she now? Emma just turned 2, Kevin replied, his face lighting up with paternal pride. She's at that age where everything is an adventure. We're hoping to refinance in a few years so we can start saving for her college education. That's wonderful, David said warmly. There's nothing more important than family. I imagine your parents are excited about being grandparents. Kevin's expression shifted slightly, and I saw Brittany stiffen in her chair. My father isn't in the picture, Kevin said carefully. But my mother adores Emma. She's a retired factory worker who lives about 4 hours away. She visits occasionally. Occasionally? David repeated, his tone carefully neutral. Well, she comes for holidays and birthdays, Kevin clarified, though I could hear the defensive edge creeping into his voice. We have limited space, so longer visits can be challenging. David nodded sympathetically. I can imagine it's difficult when family members have different lifestyles and expectations. Our founder faced some similar challenges with her own family relationships. Really? Brittany asked, seeming interested despite herself. Oh yes, David replied. She often talks about how important it is to maintain perspective about what really matters in life. She came from very humble beginnings and worked extremely hard to achieve success, but she never forgot where she came from or the people who helped her along the way. I watched Kevin fidget uncomfortably in his seat. David was being subtle, but the message was coming through clearly enough to make my son squirm. "She sounds like an inspiring woman," Kevin said politely. "She absolutely is," David agreed. "In fact, her story might surprise you." She started as a single mother working double shifts in a factory, but through careful investing and smart business decisions, she became one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the region. Most people had no idea about her accomplishments because she preferred to remain humble and private. "What kind of business?" Brittany asked. "This one, actually," David said with a slight smile. She was one of the founding partners of Cascade Lending Solutions. Her investment and vision helped build this company from a small regional lender to what it is today. Kevin sat up straighter. "She was one of the founders? That's incredible. What's her name?" David glanced up toward Harold's office window where he knew I was watching. "Her name is Margaret Chen." The silence in the conference room was deafening. I watched as Kevin's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and then pure shock. Brittany looked between Kevin and David, clearly not understanding the significance of the name. "Margaret Chen," Kevin repeated slowly. That's my mother's name." "Is it really?" David asked with perfectly feigned surprise. "What a remarkable coincidence." "Wait," Brittany interjected, finally catching up. "Are you saying that Kevin's mother is involved with this company?" "I'm not saying anything," David replied smoothly. "I'm simply sharing information about one of our founding partners who happens to share a name with Kevin's mother. Although, now that I think about it, Margaret Chen is quite an unusual name. How many Margaret Chens could there be in this area?" Kevin's hands were trembling slightly as he reached for his water glass. Could you describe this founding partner?" "Just out of curiosity." "Well, let's see," David said thoughtfully. "She's in her early 70s, about average height, originally from the Pacific Northwest. She has one son who she raised as a single mother while working in a textile factory. She's extremely intelligent and has an incredible work ethic, though she tends to be modest about her achievements." The color had completely drained from Kevin's face. Brittany was staring at him with growing alarm, clearly beginning to understand the implications of what David was saying. That sounds exactly like my mother," Kevin whispered. "How interesting," David said calmly. "Well, if your mother is indeed our Margaret Chen, then you should know that she's one of the most respected people in this industry. Her commitment to helping working families achieve home ownership has been the guiding principle of our company for over 2 decades. "But that's impossible," Brittany said, her voice rising slightly. "Kevin's mother is just a retired factory worker. She lives in a tiny house and drives an old car. She can't afford anything more than basic necessities." David raised an eyebrow. "I think you might be surprised by how successful people choose to live their lives. Our Margaret Chen could afford to live anywhere she wanted, but she prefers the simplicity of small-town life. She finds value in things other than material possessions." Kevin was staring down at the conference table, his breathing shallow and rapid. "If my mother is really a partner in this company, then that means, David finished gently, "that she's been one of the people responsible for helping your family achieve home ownership. In fact, every payment you've made on this house has contributed to her success, just as her original investment made your loan possible." The irony was so perfect that I almost felt sorry for Kevin. Almost. "I need to call her," Kevin said, suddenly reaching for his phone. "Actually," David said, standing up, "that won't be necessary. Margaret, would you like to join us?" I made my way down to the conference room, taking my time and enjoying every step. When I opened the door, Kevin and Brittany turned to look at me with expressions of absolute shock and disbelief. "Hello, Kevin," I said calmly, taking the empty chair across from them. "Brittany, I hope you don't mind that I decided to attend this meeting." Kevin's mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. "Mom, what? How? I don't understand." "What don't you understand, sweetheart?" I asked, folding my hands on the table. "The fact that I helped build this company, or the fact that I've been paying attention to how you've been treating me for the past 3 years?" Brittany found her voice first. "This has to be some kind of mistake. Kevin's mother doesn't have money. She lives like what, Brittany?" I asked quietly. "Like someone beneath your notice? Like someone who doesn't deserve basic respect and courtesy?" The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Kevin was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time, while Brittany looked like she was going to be sick. "Mom," Kevin finally managed, "why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ever say anything about the company or the money?" I leaned back in my chair, studying my son's face. "Because I wanted you to love and respect me for who I am, not for what I have. I wanted to know that the values I taught you about treating people with kindness and dignity would guide your behavior, regardless of their financial status. But I do love and respect you," Kevin protested weakly. "Do you?" I asked. "Is that why you've let me sleep on your uncomfortable couch for 3 years while strangers get the guest room? Is that why you sit silent while your wife treats me like an unwelcome burden? Is that why you've never once stood up for me or acknowledged the sacrifices I made to give you the opportunities you've had?" Kevin's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the little boy I had raised instead of the arrogant man he had become. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what, Kevin? That your mother is a human being who deserves basic courtesy? That the woman who worked double shifts to pay for your education might have feelings? That treating family members with disrespect is wrong regardless of their bank account balance?" Brittany was crying now, though whether from shame or fear I couldn't tell. "Mrs. Chen, I had no idea. If I had known—" "Known what?" I interrupted. "Known that I was wealthy? Would that have changed how you treated me? Because if it would have, then that tells me everything I need to know about your character." The room fell silent again. David was watching the proceedings with fascination, clearly enjoying the drama unfolding before him. "What happens now?" Kevin asked quietly. Are you going to take our house?" I looked at my son for a long moment, seeing both the scared little boy he had been and the selfish man he had become. This was the moment I had been building toward, the point where Kevin would finally understand the consequences of his choices, and hopefully begin to change. "That depends entirely on you," I said finally. "This company has always been about helping families, and despite everything, you're still my family. But some things are going to change, starting immediately." The silence in the conference room stretched taut as a wire. Kevin sat frozen in his chair, his face pale and drawn, while Brittany dabbed at her eyes with a tissue David had quietly provided. I could see the wheels turning in both their minds, trying to process the complete reversal of everything they thought they knew about our family dynamic. "What do you want from us?" Brittany asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. For the first time since I had known her, she looked genuinely vulnerable, stripped of the arrogant confidence that had always defined her interactions with me. I stood up slowly, walking to the large windows that overlooked downtown Portland. The city spread out below us, bustling with afternoon traffic and people going about their daily lives, blissfully unaware of the family drama unfolding in this corporate conference room. "What I want," I said without turning around, "is for my son to remember who raised him and what values I tried to instill in him. What I want is to be treated with the basic dignity that any mother should expect from her children." What I want is for my granddaughter to grow up in a home where respect and kindness matter more than social status and material possessions. I turned back to face them, my voice steady but firm. But what I require, immediately and without negotiation, are some concrete changes in how this family operates. Kevin straightened in his chair, some color returning to his cheeks. Tell me what you need, Mom. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. First, I said, retaking my seat. The guest room situation ends today. When I visit my granddaughter, I will sleep in a proper bed, not on your living room furniture. The idea that you would house strangers more comfortably than your own mother is unacceptable, and it stops now. Brittany nodded quickly. Of course. The guest room will always be ready for you. I'll make sure of it personally. Second, I continued, I want regular visits with Emma, not the sporadic, inconvenient arrangements we've had up until now. I want scheduled time with my granddaughter, where I can actually build a relationship with her, where I can be a grandmother instead of an awkward stranger who shows up occasionally. Absolutely, Kevin said eagerly. We can set up a schedule right away, maybe every other weekend, or whatever works best for you. I held up my hand. I'm not finished. Third, there will be no more dismissive comments about my background, my home, or my lifestyle choices. Brittany, your little remarks about my outdated methods and modest accommodations have not gone unnoticed. They end today. Brittany's face flushed red. Mrs. Chen, I sincerely apologize. I never meant to be disrespectful. I was trying to... You were trying to establish yourself as superior to me, I said bluntly. You were trying to put me in my place and make sure everyone understood that I was the poor relation who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you were willing to provide. David cleared his throat softly. If I may, he interjected. I think it might be helpful for everyone to understand just how significant Margaret's contributions to this community have been. The company she helped build has provided home loans to over 15,000 families in the Pacific Northwest. Her insistence on fair lending practices and reasonable terms has saved those families millions of dollars in excessive fees and interest charges. I appreciated David's support, but I wasn't finished making my point. The fourth change, I continued, is that Kevin needs to start standing up for me. When someone disrespects your mother, you don't sit silently scrolling through your phone. You address it. You defend the woman who sacrificed everything to give you opportunities. Kevin winced as if I had slapped him. You're right, Mom. I've been a coward. I've let myself forget what's important. Yes, you have, I agreed. And it's going to stop. Because, Kevin, whether you realize it or not, the way you treat me is teaching Emma how families should work. Do you want her to learn that it's acceptable to disrespect her parents when they get older? Do you want her to think that success gives her the right to look down on people who have less? The question hit home harder than anything else I had said. Kevin loved Emma fiercely, and the thought of her growing up with the same callous attitudes that he had developed was clearly devastating to him. I never thought about it that way, he said quietly. God, Mom, what kind of example have I been setting? A poor one, I said honestly. But it's not too late to change. Emma is young enough that she can learn different lessons if you start teaching them now. Brittany spoke up hesitantly. Mrs. Chen, I want to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me. Do you hate me? Do you think I'm a terrible person? The question surprised me with its directness. I studied my daughter-in-law's face, seeing something I had never noticed before beneath her polished exterior. Fear, insecurity, and a desperate need for approval that she had been trying to mask with arrogance and superiority. I don't hate you, Brittany, I said slowly. But I think you've been trying so hard to prove that you belong in certain social circles that you've forgotten how to treat people with basic human decency. You've been so focused on appearances and status that you've lost sight of what actually matters. You're right, she admitted, fresh tears starting to flow. I've been horrible to you, and I don't even have a good excuse for it. I guess I was threatened by you in some weird way. Threatened by me? I asked, genuinely puzzled. Kevin talked about you all the time when we first started dating, Brittany explained. How strong you were, how you had raised him on your own, how much he admired you. I think I was jealous of your relationship with him, and I wanted to diminish your importance in his life so I could feel more important myself. It was the most honest thing Brittany had ever said to me, and I felt a small crack appear in the wall of resentment I had built up against her. Brittany, I said gently, Kevin's love for me doesn't take anything away from his love for you. Family relationships aren't a competition where someone has to lose for someone else to win. The sooner you understand that, the happier everyone will be. David had been quietly observing our family drama, but now he spoke up again. If I may share a personal observation, he said, I've watched Margaret work with troubled families throughout the years. Some people make mistakes because they're fundamentally selfish or cruel, but others make mistakes because they're insecure or afraid. The difference matters when it comes to whether people can change. What kind do you think we are? Kevin asked, though he looked like he was afraid to hear the answer. I think, David said carefully, that you're both fundamentally good people who lost your way. Kevin, you forgot where you came from because it was easier than dealing with Brittany's social pressures. Brittany, you treated Margaret poorly because you were afraid of being judged by your own family and friends. That's not an excuse, Brittany said quickly. I know it's not an excuse. No, it's not, I agreed, but understanding why something happened is the first step toward making sure it doesn't happen again. Kevin reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, I know I've been a terrible son. I know saying sorry isn't enough. But please tell me how I can start making this right. I looked down at our joined hands, remembering all the times I had held those same hands when Kevin was small and scared, when he had nightmares, when he was bullied at school, when his father left and Kevin thought it was somehow his fault. You can start, I said, by inviting me for dinner this Sunday. A real dinner, where we sit around the table and talk about Emma and your jobs and what's happening in your lives. Not some formal affair where everyone's walking on eggshells, but a normal family meal. Yes, Kevin said immediately. Absolutely yes. And Brittany, I continued, turning to my daughter-in-law, you can start by showing me those photo albums of Emma that I know you've been putting together. I want to see pictures of her first steps and her first birthday and all the moments I've missed because you didn't think I was important enough to include. Brittany nodded eagerly. I have dozens of albums, hundreds of pictures. I'll show you everything. Good, I said, because being Emma's grandmother isn't just something I want to do. It's something I'm going to do with or without your cooperation. But I'd prefer to do it with your cooperation. David stood up and began gathering his papers. I think this has been a very productive meeting, he said with a slight smile. Kevin, Brittany, your mortgage account is in excellent standing, and we look forward to continuing our business relationship for many years to come. Margaret, as always, it's been a pleasure working with you. As David left the room, the three of us sat in silence for a moment, all of us seemingly unsure how to transition from this intense confrontation back to normal family interaction. Mom, Kevin said finally, can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you ever remarry? You were young when Dad left, and you're an amazing woman. You must have had opportunities. The question caught me off guard. We had never really talked about my romantic life, or lack thereof, during Kevin's childhood. I had a few opportunities over the years, I admitted, but I was so focused on raising you and building a secure future for our family that relationships always seemed like a distraction. By the time you were grown and I might have had time for romance, I had gotten used to my independence. Don't you get lonely? Brittany asked softly. Sometimes, I said honestly. But I've built a good life for myself. I have friends in my community. I have my work with the company, and I have hobbies that bring me joy. Loneliness is a choice, not an inevitable consequence of being single. Kevin squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry you had to sacrifice so much for me. I didn't sacrifice anything, I corrected him. I made choices. Every parent makes choices about how to prioritize their time and energy. I chose to focus on you because I loved you, and because I believed you were worth the investment. And I repaid you by treating you like garbage, he said bitterly. You repaid me by becoming successful and building a family of your own, I said. The way you've treated me lately is disappointing, but it doesn't erase everything good that came before it. Brittany spoke up hesitantly. Mrs. Chen, can I ask you about the business? How did you go from working in a factory to becoming a successful entrepreneur? I mean, that's an incredible achievement. I was surprised by her genuine interest, but pleased by it as well. It wasn't easy, I said, and it required taking risks that most people wouldn't have been comfortable with. But I had good partners and good advice, and I was willing to work harder than anyone else to make it succeed. Harold Yamamoto, Kevin said suddenly. He's the founder you mentioned earlier, isn't he? The one who offered you the partnership? Harold saw potential in me when no one else did, I confirmed. He taught me about business and finance and helped me understand how to build something lasting. Without his mentorship and friendship, none of this would have been possible. Is he still involved with the company? Brittany asked. He's officially retired, but he still comes in a few days a week. Harold's in his 80s now, but his mind is as sharp as ever. He's been like a father to me in many ways. Kevin looked thoughtful. I'd like to meet him sometime, if that would be appropriate. I feel like I should thank him for everything he's done for our family. I'm sure Harold would enjoy meeting you, I said. He's heard a lot about you over the years, though probably not the recent parts of the story. What did you tell him? About me? Kevin asked nervously. I told him about your academic achievements, your career success, your marriage, Emma's birth. I bragged about you constantly, actually. Harold probably got tired of hearing about my brilliant son and his beautiful family. Kevin's face crumpled again. God, Mom, how could I have been so blind to what I was doing? People get caught up in their own lives, I said. It happens. What matters now is what you do going forward. Brittany stood up abruptly. I need to make some phone calls, she announced. Mrs. Chen, we're supposed to have dinner with my parents tomorrow night, but I'm going to cancel it. I want to cook dinner for you instead, if you'll let me. You don't need to cancel plans with your parents on my account, I said. Yes, I do, Brittany said firmly. We've had 100 dinners with my parents, and we've never once invited you to join us for a family meal. That changes tomorrow night. After Brittany left the room to make her calls, Kevin and I sat alone in the conference room. Through the windows, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the city, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Mom, Kevin said quietly, I know I have a lot of work to do to earn back your trust and respect. I know saying sorry isn't enough. No, it's not enough, I agreed, but it's a start. And Kevin, I want you to understand something important. I didn't reveal my connection to this company to threaten you or to make you grovel. I did it because I love you and because I want our family to be better than this. I know, he said. And I promise you, things will be different. Brittany and I both understand now that we've been acting like spoiled children, and we're going to do better. I hope so, I said. Because Emma is watching everything we do, and she's learning from our example. I want her to grow up knowing that family members take care of each other, that success comes with responsibility, and that treating people with kindness and respect is more important than any material achievement. Kevin nodded emphatically. She will, I swear to you, she will. As we prepared to leave the conference room, Kevin hesitated at the door. Mom, can I ask you one more thing? What is it? The house we live in, the mortgage we're paying. Does it bother you that we're essentially paying you rent without knowing it? I considered the question carefully. What bothers me isn't that you're paying me unknowingly. What bothers me is that you've been so focused on impressing people with your expensive house that you forgot to make room in it for your own mother. That changes now, Kevin said. Starting this weekend, that house becomes a real family home. A place where you're always welcome, always comfortable, and always treated with the love and respect you deserve. I'll believe it when I see it, I said, but I was smiling as I said it. As we walked out of the Cascade Lending Solutions building, together I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope for my relationship with my son. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and rebuilding trust would take time, but for the first time in 3 years, I believed that Kevin and Brittany were capable of becoming the kind of people I had always hoped they would be. The lesson had been painful for everyone involved, but sometimes the most important lessons are. As we reached our cars in the parking lot, Kevin turned to me one last time. Mom, I love you. I know I haven't shown it very well lately, but I do love you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again. I love you too, sweetheart, I replied. Now go home and start being the man I raised you to be. The drive back to my house that evening felt surreal. After 3 years of dreading visits to Portland, of steel myself for another round of subtle humiliations and uncomfortable sleeping arrangements, I found myself actually looking forward to returning. The phone rang just as I was pulling into my driveway, and Kevin's name appeared on the caller ID. Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened today, he said without preamble. I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What is it, sweetheart? How long have you known that Cascade Lending Solutions held our mortgage? When we first bought the house, did you know we were essentially borrowing money from you? I turned off the engine and sat in my car, considering how to answer. I found out about 6 months after you closed on the house. Harold mentioned your name during one of our quarterly meetings, and I nearly choked on my coffee. It was quite a shock, actually. And you never said anything? For 2.5 years, you knew we were paying our mortgage to your company, and you never once mentioned it? Kevin, what would have been the point? You were proud of your house, proud of your ability to qualify for such a large loan. If I had told you then that your mother was involved with the lending company, would you have felt good about your achievement? Or would you have felt like I was somehow manipulating your success? There was a long pause. I probably would have felt like you were interfering, he admitted reluctantly. I probably would have accused you of pulling strings behind the scenes or something equally stupid. Exactly. And I didn't want to take that sense of accomplishment away from you. You and Brittany qualified for that loan based on your own creditworthiness and income. The fact that my company provided the funding was just coincidence. But Mom, all those times we complained about mortgage payments, all those times Brittany stressed about interest rates or worried about what would happen if one of us lost our jobs, you just listened without saying anything. That must have been incredibly frustrating. I climbed out of the car and walked toward my front door, fishing for my keys. It was frustrating, but not for the reasons you might think. I wasn't frustrated because you didn't know about my involvement with the company. I was frustrated because you were so stressed about money that you couldn't enjoy your beautiful home and your growing family. What do you mean? I unlocked my door and stepped into the small foyer, automatically turning on the lights and checking the thermostat. My house felt especially cozy after the sterile corporate environment of the Cascade Lending Solutions conference room. Kevin, every time you called me worried about making your mortgage payment, every time Brittany fretted about your debt-to-income ratio, I wanted to tell you that you were being ridiculous. You both have excellent jobs, you've never missed a payment, and you qualified for one of the best interest rates we offer. But instead of enjoying your success, you were constantly anxious about losing it. We were just being responsible, Kevin protested. There's a difference between being responsible and being paralyzed by fear, I said, settling into my favorite armchair. You and Brittany have spent so much energy worrying about maintaining your lifestyle that you forgot to actually live your lives. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Is that why you live so simply? Because you don't want possessions to own you instead of the other way around? The question showed more insight than I had expected from him. Partly, yes. I learned a long time ago that having enough money to feel secure is wonderful, but having so much that you're constantly worried about losing it can be its own kind of prison. But you could afford a mansion, couldn't you? You could drive a luxury car, take expensive vacations, buy whatever you wanted. I could, I agreed. But why would I want those things? This house is the perfect size for me. My car gets me where I need to go. I take vacations to places I find interesting, not places I think will impress other people. I buy what I need and some of what I want. But I don't buy things just to prove I can afford them. Brittany's going to have a hard time understanding that philosophy, Kevin said, with a rueful laugh. Maybe. Or maybe this whole experience will help her reevaluate what's really important to her. Sometimes people get caught up in trying to prove their worth through material possessions because they don't believe in their own inherent value. Is that what you think happened to me? I chose my words carefully. I think you got caught up in trying to fit into a world where your background made you feel insecure. Instead of being proud of where you came from, you started seeing it as something to hide or overcome. You're right, Kevin said quietly. I was embarrassed by our old apartment, by the fact that you worked in a factory, by how different our lives were from Brittany's family. I thought if I could just make enough money and buy the right house and wear the right clothes, I could transform myself into someone worthy of her world. And what did that transformation cost you? It cost me my relationship with you, he said, his voice breaking slightly. It cost me my self-respect. It cost me the chance to be a good example for Emma. God, Mom, I've been such a fool. You've been human, I corrected him. Making mistakes is part of growing up, even when you're 32 years old. What matters now is what you do with this opportunity to change course. I want to be better, Kevin said. For you, for Emma, for myself. But I'm not sure I know how to start. Start by coming to dinner on Sunday like we planned. Start by treating me like a valued member of this family instead of an inconvenient obligation. Start by teaching Emma that her grandmother is someone worth knowing and respecting. And what about the money situation? What about the mortgage? And the company and all of that? I had been expecting this question, and I had given it considerable thought. Nothing changes with regard to your mortgage. You'll continue making your payments to Cascade Lending Solutions just like always. The only difference is that now you know who benefits from those payments. But that feels weird now, knowing that we're essentially paying rent to you. Kevin, you're not paying rent to me. You're paying a legitimate mortgage to a legitimate company for a home that you legitimately own. The fact that I'm a partner in that company doesn't change the fundamental nature of the transaction. What if we wanted to refinance? What if we wanted to pay off the loan early? Would that create some kind of conflict of interest? Any financial decisions you want to make regarding your mortgage should be based on what's best for your family, not on my involvement with the company. If refinancing somewhere else would save you money, then you should refinance. If you want to pay off the loan early, then you should pay it off early. I never want you to feel like you're financially beholden to me. But we are financially beholden to you, Kevin pointed out. In a very literal sense. No, you're not. You have a contractual relationship with a business entity. The fact that I'm involved with that business entity doesn't create personal obligations beyond what's spelled out in your loan documents. Kevin sighed. This is all so confusing. I don't know how to process the fact that my mother is apparently some kind of secret business mogul. I laughed despite myself. Kevin, I'm not a secret business mogul. I'm a retired factory worker who made a good investment 25 years ago and has been quietly benefiting from it ever since. The only reason it seems dramatic is because you never bothered to ask me about my life beyond your childhood memories. What do you mean? When was the last time you asked me how I was doing financially? When was the last time you inquired about my retirement planning or wondered how I could afford to maintain my house and car without a pension from the factory? Kevin was silent for a long moment. I never asked, he admitted finally. I just assumed you were scraping by on Social Security and maybe some small savings account. Why did you assume that? Because that's what I expected a retired factory worker to have. I never thought beyond the stereotype. And that, Kevin, is part of the problem. You stopped seeing me as a complete person with my own story and started seeing me as a caricature of what you thought a working-class mother should be. God, that's awful. I'm so sorry, Mom. The good news is that people can change their perspectives at any age. You're learning things about me now that you should have known years ago, and that's a start. The next morning, I woke up to find 17 missed calls and 34 text messages on my phone. Apparently, Kevin had spent the evening telling Brittany about our conversation, and she had spiraled into a panic about everything from mortgage payments to family dynamics to her own behavior over the past 3 years. The text messages ranged from frantic apologies to detailed questions about business practices to promises of behavioral reform. By the time I reached the end of the thread, I was exhausted just from reading them. I called Kevin, instead of trying, to respond to Brittany's digital hysteria. Mom, thank God, he said when he answered. Brittany's been up all night freaking out about everything. She's convinced herself that you're going to foreclose on our house or sue us for emotional damages, or something equally dramatic. Why would I foreclose on your house? You've never missed a payment. I tried to explain that, but she's not thinking rationally right now. She's also worried that her parents are going to find out about your business success and judge her for how she's treated you. Are her parents likely to find out? Not unless we tell them. But Brittany's convinced that everyone's going to know somehow, and that she'll be publicly humiliated for treating a successful businesswoman like she was some kind of charity case. I could hear Brittany's voice in the background, high-pitched, with anxiety. Is she there now? She's pacing around the kitchen, making lists of things she needs to apologize for. I think she's having some kind of breakdown. Put her on the phone. Are you sure? She's pretty worked up. Put her on the phone, Kevin. There was a brief pause, then Brittany's voice came through the speaker, shaky and tearful. Mrs. Chen, I am so sorry. I've been horrible to you, and I don't know how to fix it. I made lists of all the things I said and did, and it's just awful. I can't believe how terrible I've been. Brittany, take a deep breath, I said calmly. You're spiraling, and that's not helping anyone. But I need to make this right. I need to figure out how to apologize properly and how to be better and how to make sure Emma doesn't learn the wrong lessons from my behavior. The best apology is changed behavior, I said firmly. Stop making lists and start planning how you're going to act differently going forward. But what if it's too late? What if you can never forgive me for how I've treated you? Brittany, I'm not holding a grudge against you. I was hurt and angry about your behavior, but I don't hate you. You're Kevin's wife and Emma's mother, which makes you family whether you've acted like it or not. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, I said bluntly. But I'm giving it to you anyway, because holding on to anger and resentment would hurt me more than it would hurt you. The question is what you're going to do with this second chance. I want to be better. I want to be the kind of person you can be proud to have as a daughter-in-law. Then stop wallowing in guilt and start focusing on change. Guilt is self-indulgent. Change requires work. There was a pause. Then Brittany's voice came back stronger. You're right. I've been so focused on feeling bad about what I did that I wasn't thinking about what I should do differently. Exactly. Now, are you still planning to cook dinner for me tomorrow night? Yes, absolutely. I'm making your favorite meal, if you'll tell me what that is. I don't have a single favorite meal, Brittany. I like good food prepared with care and shared with people I love. Whatever you cook will be fine as long as you put thought and effort into it. After I hung up, I spent the morning doing something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for new clothes. Not because I needed them, but because I realized that my upcoming visits to Kevin and Brittany's house would be different now, and I wanted to look the part of a successful businesswoman. Rather than the dowdy grandmother they had been expecting, I chose a beautiful cashmere sweater in deep emerald green, a pair of well-tailored slacks, and some elegant flats that were both comfortable and stylish. At the jewelry counter, I indulged in a delicate gold necklace that I had been admiring for months, but had never purchased because it seemed too fancy for my simple lifestyle. The saleswoman at the department store was friendly and helpful, clearly assuming I was shopping for a special occasion. When she asked about the event, I found myself smiling. "I'm having dinner with my family," I said. "It's the first time in years that I'm actually looking forward to it." That afternoon, Harold called to check on how the previous day's revelation had gone. "I've been worried about you," he said without preamble. "That was quite a dramatic scene you orchestrated yesterday. How did Kevin and Brittany react after you left the office?" "Better than I expected, actually. Kevin called me last night, and we had the most honest conversation we've had in years. Brittany's having a bit of a meltdown, but I think it's a productive meltdown." "And how are you feeling about everything?" "Relieved," I said without hesitation. "I'm relieved that I finally stood up for myself, relieved that Kevin knows the truth about my situation, and relieved that we can start building a real relationship instead of this artificial dynamic we've been trapped in." "Do you think they'll follow through on their promises to change?" "I think they will, at least for a while. Whether the changes stick long-term remains to be seen, but I'm optimistic." "And if they don't stick? If Kevin and Brittany revert to their old patterns once the shock wears off?" I considered the question carefully. "Then I'll deal with that situation when it arises. But Harold, I'm not going back to being treated like a second-class family member. That chapter of my life is over, regardless of what happens next." "Good for you," Harold said warmly. "I've watched you handle difficult business situations for 25 years, and you've always been fair but firm. It's about time you applied those same principles to your personal life." "I should have done it years ago." "Maybe. Or maybe you needed to reach this point before you were ready to take such decisive action. Either way, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." That evening, I received another call from Kevin. This time, his voice was lighter, less burdened with guilt and anxiety. "Mom, I wanted to give you an update on the dinner situation. Brittany's been cooking all day and the house smells incredible. She's also completely rearranged the guest room with new bedding and fresh flowers." "That sounds lovely." "And I called Emma's daycare to let them know that she'll be having a special dinner with her grandmother tomorrow night. They were excited to hear that you'll be visiting more regularly." "You told them I'd be visiting more regularly?" "I told them that Grandma Margaret is a very important person in Emma's life, and that we're making sure she gets to spend more time with her granddaughter." The teachers seemed pleased about that. "How is Emma doing with all the changes in routine?" "She's too young to understand the adult drama, but she definitely picks up on the emotional atmosphere in the house. She's been happier and more relaxed since Brittany stopped being so tense and anxious." Children are remarkably sensitive to family dynamics, even when they can't articulate what they're sensing. "Mom, can I ask you something else?" "Of course." "Do you think Emma will grow up to be ashamed of us the way I became ashamed of you?" The question broke my heart a little. "Kevin, Emma will grow up to reflect the values and attitudes you teach her. If you teach her to be grateful for her advantages while respecting people from all walks of life, she'll become that kind of person. If you teach her that worth is measured by bank accounts and social status, she'll become that kind of person. Instead, I want her to be proud of her family, all of her family, including her grandmother who worked in a factory and built a business and raised her father to be successful. Then tell her those stories, Kevin. Tell her about the struggles and the victories, about the hard work and the smart decisions, about the importance of treating people with dignity regardless of their circumstances. I will. I promise I will. As Sunday approached, I found myself genuinely excited about the dinner invitation. For the first time in 3 years, I would be entering Kevin and Brittany's house as a welcomed guest rather than a tolerated inconvenience. The difference felt monumental, even though the external circumstances remained largely the same. I put on my new outfit and admired myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was confident, successful, and ready to reclaim her rightful place in her family. It had been a long time since I had felt this way about myself, and I liked what I saw. Sunday arrived crisp and clear. One of those perfect autumn days in Portland when the leaves are at their peak and the air carries just a hint of wood smoke from neighborhood fireplaces. I drove to Kevin and Brittany's house with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years, genuinely excited to spend time with my family instead of dreading another awkward encounter. The first thing I noticed when I pulled into their driveway was the absence of other cars. For the first time since they had moved to Westbrook Hills, I would be the only guest at their dinner table. No business associates to impress, no social climbers to accommodate, no members of Brittany's extended family taking precedence over Kevin's mother. Kevin opened the front door before I could even ring the bell, and the smile on his face was so genuine and warm that it reminded me of the little boy who used to wait by the window for me to come home from work. "Mom, you look absolutely beautiful," he said, embracing me with more warmth than I had felt from him in years. "That color is perfect on you." "Thank you, sweetheart. You look pretty good yourself." And he did. Kevin had always been a handsome man, but the stress and pretension that had marked his features for the past few years seemed to have melted away, leaving behind someone who looked more relaxed and authentic than I had seen him since his wedding day. As I stepped into the foyer, the aroma of roasted chicken and fresh herbs enveloped me, along with something else I couldn't immediately identify. It took me a moment to realize what was different. The house felt warm and lived in instead of like a museum display. There were Emma's toys scattered tastefully around the living room, family photos that actually included me prominently displayed on the mantelpiece, and fresh flowers arranged casually throughout the main rooms. "Brittany's been cooking since dawn," Kevin said, taking my coat. "I think she's trying to single-handedly prepare enough food for a small army." "Where is she?" "In the kitchen, having a minor panic attack about whether the timing on the side dishes is right. She'll be out in a minute." "And Emma?" "Having a tea party in her room with her stuffed animals. She's been talking about Grandma Margaret's visit all week. I think you're going to be amazed at how much she's grown and changed since Christmas." Before I could respond, Emma herself came running down the hallway, her dark hair bouncing in pigtails and her face bright with excitement. She had grown several inches since I had last seen her, and her vocabulary had expanded dramatically. "Grandma Margaret!" she squealed, launching herself into my arms with the uninhibited enthusiasm that only 2-year-olds can muster. "Daddy said you're staying for dinner and maybe we can read books." "We absolutely can read books," I assured her, holding her close and marveling at how solid and real she felt in my arms. "Did you pick out some stories for us to share?" "I picked out 5 books," Emma announced proudly. "Maybe 6. Mommy said that's probably too many, but Daddy said Grandma Margaret likes books very much." "Daddy's right. I love books, and I love reading them with my favorite granddaughter." "I'm your only granddaughter," Emma giggled, as if this were the funniest thing in the world. "That makes you even more special," I told her, and watched her face light up with joy. Brittany appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, wearing an apron over a simple but elegant dress. Her hair was pulled back in a casual style and her makeup was understated. For the first time since I had known her, she looked approachable and genuine instead of like she was preparing for a photo shoot. Mrs. Chen, she said, walking over to greet me with what appeared to be sincere warmth. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for giving us this chance to start over. Thank you for the invitation, Brittany. The house smells wonderful. I made roast chicken with herb butter, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, and apple crisp for dessert. I tried to choose comfort foods instead of anything too fancy or complicated. That sounds perfect. Emma tugged on my hand. Grandma Margaret, want to see my room? I have new books and a dollhouse and a dress-up box. I'd love to see your room, sweetheart, but maybe we should let Mommy finish cooking dinner first. Actually, Brittany said, surprising me, dinner won't be ready for another 30 minutes. If you'd like to see Emma's room and spend some time with her, that would be perfect. Emma led me up the stairs, chattering nonstop about her dollhouse, her favorite stuffed elephant, and the new puzzle she was working on. Her room was a delightful mix of toddler chaos and careful organization, with toys and books arranged accessibly and artwork displayed at her eye level. What struck me most was how many photos there were of our family. Pictures of Emma with Kevin. And Brittany, yes, but also several photos of Emma with me from our brief visits, and even some old pictures of Kevin as a child that I had given them years ago. Look, Grandma Margaret, Emma said, pointing to a framed photo on her nightstand. That's you and me at Christmas. Daddy said you're going to come visit lots more now. That's right, sweetheart. I'm going to visit much more often, and we're going to have lots of adventures together. What kind of adventures? Well, we could go to the zoo or the children's museum, or maybe even have sleepovers sometimes. Emma's eyes grew wide. Sleepovers? Like with pajamas and breakfast in the morning? Exactly like that. We spent the next 20 minutes reading books together, with Emma snuggled against my side on her little reading chair. She was remarkably articulate for her age, asking thoughtful questions about the stories and making connections between the books and her own experiences. When Kevin called us down for dinner, Emma took my hand and led me to the dining room, which had been set with their good china and crystal glasses. The table looked elegant, but not intimidating, with candles flickering softly and fresh flowers, providing a cheerful centerpiece. This is beautiful, Brittany, I said, genuinely impressed by the effort she had put into making the evening special. I wanted everything to be perfect, she replied, then caught herself. Actually, that's not true. I wanted everything to be welcoming and comfortable. I'm trying to care less about perfection and more about making people feel loved. Kevin pulled out my chair with a flourish. Mom, you're sitting in the place of honor tonight. What's the place of honor? Emma asked, scrambling into her booster seat. It's the most important seat at the table, Kevin explained. The place where we put the person we most want to celebrate. Are we celebrating Grandma Margaret? We're celebrating our family, Brittany said, bringing in the first course. All of us together. The meal that followed was nothing short of magical. The food was delicious, but more importantly, the conversation was easy and natural. We talked about Emma's upcoming 3rd birthday, Kevin's latest project at work, Brittany's thoughts about possibly going back to college to finish her degree, and my own plans for updating my house and garden. For the first time in years, I felt like a valued member of the family instead of an awkward outsider. Kevin asked my opinion on financial decisions. Brittany solicited my advice about child-rearing challenges, and Emma insisted on showing me every bite of food before putting it in her mouth. As we were finishing the main course, Kevin cleared his throat. Mom, Brittany and I have been talking, and we want to ask you something. What is it? We'd like to establish a regular schedule for visits, Brittany said. Not just holidays and special occasions, but regular family time. Maybe every other weekend, or whatever works best for your schedule. And, Kevin added, we'd like to bring Emma to visit you sometimes too. She should see where you live and understand that Grandma Margaret has her own life and home and community. We also want to make sure Emma knows about your work and your accomplishments, Brittany continued. Kevin told me about the families you've helped through Cascade Lending Solutions, and I think it's important for Emma to understand that her grandmother is someone who has made a real difference in the world. I felt tears prick at my eyes. That means more to me than you can possibly know. There's something else, Kevin said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out an envelope. We've written you a letter. Well, Brittany wrote it, but it's from both of us. We'd like you to read it later, when you get home. What kind of letter? An explanation, Brittany said softly. A real apology. Not just words, but a commitment to specific changes. And a promise about how we're going to raise Emma to understand the importance of family and respect and gratitude. After dinner, we moved to the living room for dessert and coffee. Emma climbed into my lap with a book, and I read to her while Kevin and Brittany cleaned up the dishes together. The domestic scene was so normal and peaceful that I had to remind myself that just a week earlier, I had been sleeping on their couch and feeling like an unwelcome intruder. When Emma started to get sleepy, Kevin suggested that I help him put her to bed, something I had never been invited to do before. Will you come back tomorrow, Grandma Margaret? Emma asked as I tucked her into her little bed. Not tomorrow, sweetheart, but very soon. And next time, maybe you can come visit me at my house. Do you have toys at your house? I don't have toys yet, but I could get some special ones just for when you visit. What about books? I have lots and lots of books. More books. And then you can count. Emma smiled sleepily. I love you, Grandma Margaret. I love you too, Emma. Sweet dreams. When I returned to the living room, Kevin and Brittany were sitting together on the couch, holding hands and looking more united than I had ever seen them. Thank you, Brittany said as I sat down across from them. Thank you for giving us another chance, and thank you for being so patient with Emma tonight. She adores you. The feeling is mutual. Mom, Kevin said, I want you to know that everything is going to be different from now on. Not just the visiting schedule and the guest room situation, but everything. The way we think about family, the way we prioritize our time, the values we teach Emma. I can see that, I said. Tonight has been wonderful. We're also going to start being more honest with Emma about our family history, Brittany added. We want her to know about your work at the factory, about how you raised Kevin on your own, about the business you built. We want her to understand that success comes in many forms and that her grandmother is someone to be incredibly proud of. And we want her to know about sacrifice and hard work and putting family first, Kevin said. All the lessons you tried to teach me that I somehow forgot along the way. As the evening wound down, I realized that I didn't want to leave. For the first time in 3 years, Kevin and Brittany's house felt like a place where I belonged, where my presence was genuinely valued and appreciated. I should probably head home, I said reluctantly. It's getting late, and I have a long drive. Actually, Kevin said, we were hoping you might consider staying overnight. The guest room is all ready, and Emma would be thrilled to have breakfast with you in the morning. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. Mom, Kevin said seriously, you're not imposing. You're family. You're always welcome here for as long as you want to stay. I spent the night in the guest room that had been prepared specifically for me, sleeping on comfortable linens and waking up to the sound of Emma's laughter in the hallway. When I came down for breakfast, I found her helping Brittany make pancakes, both of them covered in flour and giggling about the mess they were making. Grandma Margaret! Emma shrieked when she saw me. We're making breakfast. Want to help? I'd love to help. The three of us finished making breakfast together while Kevin set the table and started the coffee. It was chaotic and messy and absolutely perfect, the kind of morning I had dreamed of having with my granddaughter but had never expected to experience. As I was getting ready to leave, Kevin walked me to my car and handed me another envelope. What's this? I asked. Information about Emma's preschool, her pediatrician, her favorite activities, that sort of thing. We want you to be fully informed about her life and development. We also included our work schedules for the next few months so you can plan visits when we'll all be able to spend time together. Kevin, you don't have to manage my relationship with Emma quite so carefully. I'm not trying to manage it, he said. I'm trying to facilitate it. I'm trying to make up for 3 years of keeping you at arm's length by making sure you have every opportunity to be the grandmother you want to be. The drive home that morning was filled with reflection and gratitude. I thought about the journey that had brought me to this point, from the scared young mother working double shifts at the factory to the successful businesswoman who had finally stood up for herself with her own family. The lesson I had taught Kevin and Brittany was ultimately about respect and recognition. But the lesson I had learned was about the importance of advocating for yourself and refusing to accept treatment that diminishes your worth. I had spent 3 years being patient and understanding, hoping that love alone would be enough to change their behavior. But sometimes love requires boundaries, and sometimes the people we care about most need to face consequences before they can grow. When I arrived home, I found Harold waiting on my front porch with a bottle of champagne and a curious expression. "Well?" he asked as I unlocked my door. "How did the great family reconciliation go?" "Better than I had dared to hope," I said, inviting him inside. "I think we've turned a corner. And Kevin? Has he learned his lesson?" Kevin has learned several lessons, I think. About respect, about family, about not taking people for granted. Whether those lessons stick permanently remains to be seen, but I'm optimistic. And Brittany? Brittany surprised me. I think she's genuinely committed to changing, and I think she's starting to understand that treating people well isn't about what they can do for you, but about who you choose to be. Harold opened the champagne and poured 2 glasses. "To Margaret Chen," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "Successful businesswoman, devoted mother, and one hell of a negotiator." "To second chances," I replied, clinking my glass against Hayes, "and to the courage to demand the respect we deserve." 6 months later, Emma's 3rd birthday party was held in my backyard, with a guest list that included my neighbors, Harold and his family, several of my friends from town, and Kevin and Brittany's social circle from Portland. Watching Emma run between groups of people, comfortable with adults from all walks of life, I could see that she was learning the lessons about treating everyone with kindness and respect that her parents were finally teaching her. Kevin gave a toast during the party, thanking everyone for coming and acknowledging the importance of family and community in Emma's life. When he specifically mentioned how proud he was of his mother and how much Emma adored her grandmother, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer sunshine. Brittany found me later in the afternoon as I was cleaning up wrapping paper and deflated balloons. "Mrs. Chen," she said, "I wanted you to know that Kevin and I have been seeing a family counselor. We're working on communication and priorities and making sure we don't slip back into old patterns." "That's wonderful, Brittany. How's it going?" "It's hard work, but good work. We're learning how to be the kind of people we want Emma to become. And we're learning how to be better family members to you." As the guests began to leave and the sun started to set over my little house, I reflected on how much had changed since that snowy Christmas morning, when I had finally decided to stop accepting disrespectful treatment from my own family. The road to this point hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Emma ran up to me as I was folding the last of the tablecloths, her face sticky with birthday cake and her new dress stained with grass and frosting. "Grandma Margaret, this was the best birthday party ever," she announced. "Can we have my next birthday here too?" "We'll see, sweetheart. That's still a whole year away." "But you'll still be my grandma then, right?" "I'll always be your grandma, Emma. Always and forever." As Kevin loaded the presents into his car and Brittany helped Emma into her car seat, I waved goodbye to my family with a heart full of contentment and hope. The lesson had been learned. The relationship had been rebuilt. and the future stretched ahead full of possibilities for the kind of family bonds I had always wanted us to have. Sometimes the people we love most need to discover our true worth before they can appreciate what they have. And sometimes we need to find the courage to show them exactly who we are, regardless of the consequences. In the end, respect isn't something that can be demanded or forced. It's something that must be earned and given freely. But it all starts with respecting ourselves enough to insist on the treatment we deserve. The story of how my son learned to value his mother isn't just about mortgages and business success. It's about the fundamental importance of treating family members with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. And it's about the power of standing up for yourself when the people closest to you have forgotten your worth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.